first time I met you, you were the writer-in-residence at the Soutar House. How long had you done that for?
Right, I did it for 4 years. I was very lucky. The normal space of time was 3 years, but I got an extension, and I was the last writer in residence so far. There's a hope that it might be reactivated in the future, but in the current austerity, I have to say there's no likelihood of it, in the short term anyway. So yes, I applied because I wanted a writer in residency. I wasn't overly familiar with Scots at the time. I had never heard of Soutar until I actually started to research him in order to write the job application. Uh-huh. So there were undoubtedly people who applied for the job who were more familiar with Soutar's works and with Scott's, but I had various ideas for how we might raise Soutar's profile and how I'd tackle the job generally, and I was very glad that I was the one who was chosen. So the job had two parts. On the one hand, there were the usual writer-in-residence things about running writers' groups for local writers, encouraging people to read by starting readers' groups, working with the community. I worked with all sorts of sections of the community, like I worked with travellers for a while, getting them to do writing. I worked with blind people in Blairgowrie, just all sorts of community groups. But then there was another half of the job, which was trying to raise the profile of William Soutar and generally promote interest in and awareness of his life and work. So the first stage in that was getting to know him. And it was very peculiar being in his house. I mean, I think it's the only residency in Scotland, or it was the only residency in Scotland, where you actually were in residence. You know, you were given a house to go with the job.
You actually lived there.
Yeah,
it was your main home.
And it's a huge place. You know, how many 3 good-sized bedrooms, and 3 good-sized reception rooms, including Willie's room, which is an absolutely enormous room, because it was extended for him by his father when he took to his bed. And quite a cold house, physically, well ventilated, as they say. So, but with real coal fires and things, and this panelling throughout the hall and the front office. Actually, it's 4 reception rooms, I now realise, and the front office room and Willie's room, which in Willie's day, I've been told by people who remember such things, would have been polished to a sheen, So what with all the fires and making all the fires and taking away the ashes and polishing the panelling, and it was obviously quite a heavy house to maintain. I kept those things to a minimum, I have to say. But, yeah.
But there must have been a certain amount that you would have to do because you had people coming to the house
who
were visitors.
Yeah, there was. I mean, I think the thing that was interesting about it was, if I can go back to when I moved in at first, it seemed to me that Willie's room had an atmosphere, and I wasn't particularly comfortable in there. So I stayed out of there unless I had a group in there. I would never go in there just to sit in a different place or to use the table, we actually went out and bought a table so that we could have people around to eat, and we could eat our own tea without going into Willie's room, which was where the only table was at that time.
Oh, really?
And I had quite a few visitors through who came into various sort of categories. One of the categories being people who'd always known about Willie but never visited the house, who'd not necessarily people from Perth, people who loved his poetry, or people who were in love with the man, I have to say, never having met him, in love with the idea of the man. And often those people would go into Willie's room and say something like, "I can feel him here," Now, I'm a very hard-headed, rationalist, so I don't really have truck with this sort of thing normally. But I mean, there is a distinctive feel in that room. I think what I did, for my own purposes anyway, for the 4 years I lived in the house, was I had so many people, so many groups and things in the room, that I changed the atmosphere of that room as far as I was concerned. It became a place of fellowship, as opposed to, you know, a place where a man had led 13, in fact, very tortured years. So the other place in the house where people claimed to be able to feel emanations was up in the maid's room, which is right at the top of the house and is reached by a back stair. And there, I think it's quite a sweet little room, and I never felt it was spooky. But it's tucked away under the eaves. It's got sloping ceilings, you know. It's got a door which is nailed shut, which would have led into the master bedroom if she had to get through, you know. But a lot of people said they found it spooky up there.
Is that the room that you access if you go through the kitchen and
that's right,
round
through the scullery and then up the back stairway? Yeah.
It seems now to have a notice on it saying no entry. So.
Yeah, I think that's Council Health and Safety has taken over. They've decided.
Oh right.
I think probably because there isn't another exit in case of a fire, you know.
Right.
Probably if the nailed up door was unnailed, that would change. I don't know. Anyway.